Hello everyone and welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update for the Australian region tonight, the 25th of January 2014. We have some exciting news tonight because things are starting to look better and better for a Queensland TC slash tropical low slash a lot of rain. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. My name's Chris Nitzo, and tonight we'll talk about that as well as we'll touch on the Western Australian low towards the end of the broadcast, because that is showing just some signs of possibly developing further towards the end of the forecast period, so days 5 plus. It does look like things get a little bit more interesting for that particular low. So we'll talk about that at the end, but really the focus of tonight, because of the population region that the tropical low in the Coral Sea could affect, will be the Coral Sea system. But if you're interested in the WA system, fast forward and use our timeline. Our timeline will tell you exactly where you need to go. Alright folks, let's get into this exciting update. Cyclone update by the Bureau of Meteorology today says that they still expect this tropical low to form. However, they are still very uncertain about its position and movement. Well, we're going to tell you something slightly different tonight, as most of the model guidance is now starting to become a lot more confident since this update was posted this afternoon. The updates that came out later on after the bomb posted this update suggest that we see a fairly high degree of confidence now on where the upcoming system will go. Now, we don't like contradicting the Bureau, but it is, rather than contradicting them, what we're showing you is maybe the latest guidance that they didn't have at the time of posting this update. Anyway, the likelihood of a tropical cyclone on Sunday is very low, so we don't expect it to form tomorrow. But Monday, that increases to 20 to 50%, and Tuesday continues at 20 to 50%. And we would hazard a guess that if it remains over water through Wednesday and Thursday, that we would see that increase further to high in those 2 days. But the forecast from the Bureau officially doesn't go out that far. We can see across Queensland some really good thunderstorm activity, some very intense thunderstorms developing over the northwestern half of Queensland today, and also some good line of storms here along the peninsula region. But if we track more interestingly for us towards the Coral Sea, we just see generalised heavy convective regions all across the Coral Sea. East of 160 line here, we've got a lot of convective activity along the South Pacific convergence zone, and also you can really clearly see defined there where the convection is associated with the monsoon trough, all going right across the Coral Sea and into the Southwest Pacific. The MJO has just taken a violent shove into the very active range here in the Western Pacific, in the Coral Sea slash Southwest Pacific, and it is not showing signs of wanting to push too far to the east. So therefore we're going to see active conditions in the Coral Sea and Southwest Pacific now, and higher than normal tropical cyclone chances in that region, and we're probably going to see that for at least the next 2 weeks. So we are expecting not only this particular tropical low or cyclone, but we could be seeing more potential for a new system developing in behind it in the longer term. And we won't talk about that too much tonight because our hands are full. But we need you to understand that just because Dylan, what could be called Dylan, will form early next week or early to mid next week, it does not mean that that's the end of the activity for the Coral Sea slash Southwest Pacific. The MJO here over the next 2 weeks is expected to remain in phase 6 and 7. It is expected to remain reasonably active. It starts to weaken towards the end of week 2, but until then we are expecting higher than normal cyclone chances or cyclone formation chances throughout the Coral Sea and Southwest Pacific, at least until the second week of February. The development of a tropical cyclone, the potential development of a tropical cyclone in the region, you can see here, is starting to grow to the south of the Solomons and also starting to push west over the next 2 days. We also see a little bit of potential out here in northwestern Australia, but nowhere near what we're going to see over the Coral Sea. Maybe not in the first 48 hours, but the 48 hours after that, that potential will increase a lot more than what you're seeing on the screen there. But suffice to say that these are our 2 areas of low pressure that we are watching over the next 2 days. Alright, so let's take a look at some of the ensemble guidance from the models that we are looking at here today. Now, the European ensemble, obviously the one that is most accurate normally and has been so far for this particular scenario. The Euro ensemble has been quite on the ball with this, even though the deterministic, which is the one that you might see on the weather charts often posted, is not been on the ball. It's been terrible. The ensemble has been quite good the last couple of days in suggesting a tropical lower cyclone just off the Queensland coast. So, if we take a look here tomorrow morning, we see that the low is located out here in the northeastern Coral Sea. If we take a look at Monday morning, we see that that low pushes in a westerly direction. A little bit of model variation as to where it might lie, but overall we see it pushing in a general westerly direction there by Monday morning. As we head to Tuesday morning, we see a little bit more spread in the guidance as to where it could be. There is a little bit more variability in it. So we see that while it's expected to lie in this entire region here, there is a little bit more variability both into the strength and position of the system to lie a little bit further offshore out here at day 3. Now, as we head towards day 4, we see that the system overall starts to push west. We can also see this isobar here is the 1000 hectopascal isobar, and so we expect it to deepen. The ensemble expects it to deepen by Wednesday morning as it pushes in a general westerly direction. Now, once again, the model variability suggesting that it could still be located a fair way offshore at that point in time. So maybe this isn't, while it's the favoured region, it may not be the exact area of the low. But overall, it's going to lie in that region here. As we head to Thursday, which is when the deterministic makes landfall of the system, we see that it may still be lying offshore to the east of Cairns, close enough to the coast to be causing gales regardless though. It's just a matter of will it be close enough to be causing the heavy rain by Thursday morning. And then as we head to Friday morning, we see more and more guidance now pushing it onshore. Once again, it's the landfall point that's the issue here, not so much will it make landfall, but where will it make landfall? Will it make landfall north of Cairns, or will it make landfall between Townsville and Mackay? At this point in time, that's the variable factor. That's at this point, as I say. Now, things do change, and often they change a lot in the Coral Sea, so don't take this as gospel, but we are starting to see more and more guidance pushing this onshore around about Thursday or Friday. Now, there is also something to note here that if the system has crossed the coast, there is a chance of redevelopment out here in the southern Gulf of Carpentaria, especially if it crosses north of about Cairns and pushes in a westerly direction. There is a chance it may reform in the south or southeastern Gulf of Carpentaria in the longer term. So that's on by Friday morning. We do expect a landfall, or at least a very, very close to the coast situation where it's dumping heaps of rain and heaps of wind. On Saturday, we see generally the model starts to go a little bit silly with a lot of different scenarios here and a lot of different potential lows. And interesting to note, as I mentioned at the start of our update, when we were talking about the MJO, we are expecting possibly a new system coming in off the Coral Sea, but it's way too early to tell yet, and it's way too early to hypothesize and theorize about that. All I can tell you is that the MJO is expected to remain active in this area, and therefore we would expect new convective developments even after whatever happens with this with the low we're looking at, whether it crosses the coast, where it gets near the coast, whatever happens after it, we still expect an active area of convection and convergence in the Coral Sea regardless of what happens with this low. So that's something to look at longer term. So if we look at the spaghetti model plot from the GFS model, now in 48 hours time, this is Monday morning, we see a fairly high degree of confidence that there's going to be a low in the northeastern Coral Sea. As we track that through to 72 hours, we tend to start to see a lot of issues happening there with the GFS. Now, there's a lot of different guidance and a lot of variability in what happens in the longer term. In general, though, we expect a westerly trend as we look at these spaghetti model plots. We expect a westerly trend of that tropical low, but really there's a lot of variability in the guidance coming in from the GFS, and so we tend to struggle to accept it just yet. But look, overall we are seeing very similar scenario here. We are seeing at the Thursday morning mark we are seeing a tropical low located more than likely just off the North Queensland coast. Now you've got all these different model members and variabilities here, located from as far south as just north of Rocky through to the far northern Cape York. But really the overall consensus from the GFS ensemble has the system pushing onto the coast or being very, very near the coast right around that Cairns region by about Thursday morning. So that's pretty similar to what we're seeing on the European. So there's no real surprises there between the two model guidances. They're all suggesting, or they're both suggesting, very similar scenarios. As we head to Friday though, once again we see this variability where the low could start to move, or the low or the cyclone at that stage could start to move a little bit more in a southerly direction to be located between Townsville and Cairns by Friday morning. But once again, we have so much variability here where we've got the low or the cyclone could be located way out here in the central Coral Sea, all the way to way out here in the western Gulf of Carpentaria. So there's a lot of variability when we get out to that stage. But look, overall, when we start talking about the general trend of models, we are starting to see that Cook down to Mackay region is certainly the go-to region for both ensemble guidances. And if we're looking at days and times, we're looking at that Wednesday to Friday period next week. If we just have a look at a different guidance here from the UK Met model, we can see that the UK Met model actually puts the low or cyclone on the coast on the Wednesday, so a little bit earlier than the other guidances that we have. It crosses the coast Wednesday morning just to the north of Cairns. So that's a little bit of a different variation to what we've seen, but overall really they're suggesting a very similar thing. You know, it's suggesting a westerly push and a tropical low or weak tropical cyclone upon landfall. So if we take a look at the winds associated with this thing, by Monday morning we're going to see gales possibly developing along the central coast of Queensland. Now that's not really associated with the actual cyclone or low at that point. It's more associated with a southeast surge coming up the coast, and what happens is we get a big pressure squeeze between a big high down south and this low up here. And so what we're going to see is these gales a long way from the coast, but basically strong wind warning type winds anywhere from Townsville southwards on the Monday morning. And as we head towards Monday night, we'll see this low drifting to the west or west-southwest, and we see these gales continuing here, just moving up the coast a little bit as well and getting a little bit closer to the low itself. Interestingly, from the north end of the low, we start to see a little bit more wind coming in from the monsoon. The monsoon starts to intensify there on the Monday. And then by the Tuesday, we actually see the monsoon possibly reaching gale force winds coming into it from the north, as well as gales coming into it from the south. You don't need to be a genius to figure out what happens when you've got gales from one direction and gales from the opposite direction. They're going to meet, they're going to collide, something's got to happen. And as we head towards Tuesday night, we see this system continuing to head towards the coast. We start to see these gales really getting pretty well onto the coast now over the central coast and the tropical coast, the Townsville coastline, as well as gales to the north here, south of PNG. As we head to the Wednesday morning, we see that the system continues to drift in a southwest direction, likely to be a very close to being named a tropical cyclone. It's just a matter of exactly where these gales are, because they have to wrap right around the centre of the system. If they're too far removed from the centre of the system, the Bureau may actually adopt this as a monsoonal low as opposed to a tropical cyclone. I know it doesn't make much of a difference on the coast. What it does do, though, is they may not issue cyclone warnings for it, and therefore you may have to go to work still, which is a bit of a bummer. But if they decide that they do label this a tropical cyclone, then you will get cyclone warnings all through the coast, probably from about Cooktown down to Mackay, because that is where the gale force winds are going to be. That's as we go to Wednesday. And then as we go to Wednesday night, it starts to get closer and closer to the coast. Look, by that stage, I'm sure this will be a tropical cyclone. This will be named a TC by that stage, if obviously the modelling here is correct. And it's basically located just to the east-northeast of Cairns and pushing towards the coast. Now, obviously, at that point in time, we're going to see a lot of rainfall. I don't need to tell you that much. Particularly south of the system, we're going to see a hell of a lot of rain. South and west here of the system is where we're going to see the greatest convergence. And you can see here these colourings suggesting very heavy rainfall as we head into Wednesday and then into Thursday. So, folks, it's really good news here. I'm very happy to give you this good news that we're probably going to see a tropical low or tropical cyclone hitting the North Queensland coast at some point later next week. But once again, there is a little bit of variability there that just keeps it off the coast, so we do need to mention that, and we can't say it's a done deal. Definitely we can't say that just yet. It's still a long way away. Things can change, but at this point in time, the steering influence at the 500 hectopascal level seems to be the ridge and not the trough that we mentioned last night. So you can see here on Thursday, as it's crossing the coast, we've got an upper level trough way out here in the Coral Sea. It has amplified to the north, but it hasn't captured the system because the system got too far to the west. So this upper level trough, remembering what we go through this all the time, but remembering an upper level trough will want to push the system in a south to southeast direction. An upper level ridge, which is located here over southeastern Australia and likely to give them another heat wave, is going to try and push the system in a westerly direction. And so what happens is that the system, by the time this upper level trough extends or amplifies far to the north, the system is expected to be too far to the west for the upper level trough to capture it, and so it comes under the influence of the upper level ridge or the mid-level ridge, and therefore we have a general trend towards the coastline uninhibited. But really there is going to be that period in Tuesday night and Wednesday where we see it getting very close. You can see here as we head to, if we go backtrack a bit towards Wednesday morning and Tuesday night, we see the upper level trough amplifying, but we also see the system is located just outside of its clutches, and really Wednesday afternoon is going to be the key moment here. Will it get captured and start to push in a more southerly direction, which means that places like Townsville to Mackay would be under the greatest threat? Or will it continue to be guided and steered by the upper level ridge? So there is still a little bit of variability there. Don't think that landfall is a done deal, but at this point in time, all of the guidance that we have available to us is showing us that landfall is expected. However, we can never say never, and we can't say anything definite in the Coral Sea ever, because sometimes we get pulled with our pants down or caught with our pants down when we actually say something's going to happen in the Coral Sea, because it just sometimes has a mind of its own. Tomorrow's rainfall, we can see that there's going to be some showers and storms all through the north and even reaching into central western parts of Queensland as well. Most of the heavy rain tomorrow expected to be in the Gulf country and possibly even getting as far south as Mount Isa. We might see some enhanced thunderstorm and shower activity around the Charters Towers area tomorrow as well, which I'm sure is going to impress the cricketers who are going to have to play in the mud there in the Goldfield Ashes, one of the biggest carnivals around in terms of cricket carnivals. And also along the North Tropical Coast, we're going to have some showers as well. But we can see the heavier stuff offshore here. As we head to Monday, we see that the rainfall from inland Queensland is starting to move through now because we're starting to get a lot of drier air pushing into this region. We see a lot more shower activity around the Gulf country, the peninsula. We start to see more and more rainfall up here in the northern Coral Sea, and we see enhanced rainfall on the wet tropics coastline as that southeast surge pushes up the coast and starts to interact with the tropical low on the Monday. By Tuesday, we continue to see showers along the coastal fringe of Queensland, and we see this heavier rain up here in the northern parts of the Coral Sea. And by Wednesday, we start to see more, or we continue to see this shower activity, basically starting from about Bundy, but that's very light down there. But we see more and more heavy stuff along the coastal fringe. Remembering, of course, that while a tropical low is located out here, the flow onto the coast, while it might be strong, is not necessarily onshore, so it's not pulling in a lot of moisture off the Coral Sea at that point in time. We need that low to get really close to the coast before it starts to pull in a lot more moisture, and those rainfall totals will skyrocket as we head past the Wednesday period into Thursday, Friday, assuming, once again, of course, that low is located near the coastline. Okay, let's go into Western Australia now, and we're going to see a weak low expected to lie off the West Kimberley coast, very unlikely to have reached cyclone intensity. System is going to go to the north of the Pilbara on Monday, and overall the models are saying no chance of a cyclone. However, don't be too quick on that. There is general agreement that there is going to be a lot of wind shear, there's going to be a fair bit of dry air in the area, and that's what's going to inhibit this from forming into a TC. But perhaps later on in the forecast period, I know this one only goes out to Tuesday, and we see a 5 to 20% chance by Tuesday. But if we start talking maybe later next week and into next weekend, there probably will be some more favourable conditions out there, and that's what makes us think that maybe these percentages might increase late in the week next week. Now, we have heard stories of some places offshore being demobilised and some people being told to go home or stay home. And look, this is probably the reason why the latest sort of GFS ensemble does want to do something with this low offshore off the Pilbara coastline. Now, if we look at the 48-hour period, we see that there's just a generalised low pressure region here on the Monday afternoon or night. But as we head towards the Tuesday period, we see that there's more than likely, according to the GFS ensemble, some development of that tropical low to the northwest of Barrow Island into a reasonable tropical low, maybe even a weak TC. Now that's... Look, this model doesn't have much support from many of the others, so it is sort of going it alone a little bit with this thought. But I guess if you work on an offshore rig or anything like that, you probably can't take the chance, and that's probably why you've been demobilised. But we can't speak for those companies, obviously, but that's what I would imagine would have happened. As we head to 96 hours there, we continue to see it push in a westerly... Sorry about that. As we head to 96 hours, we continue to see it push in a westerly direction away from the Pilbara/Gascoyne coastline. And we continue to see the potential for that system to develop a little bit as it does so. And then as we head to day 5, it continues to push in a southwesterly direction further and further away from the coast. So look, that's the GFS ensemble. If we look at the European, very little support to that from the Euro. So we see in 48 hours from the Euro, we just see this situation just here to the west of the Pilbara coastline, north of the Pilbara coastline, west of the Kimberley coastline. Just the chance there, the hint of something a little bit more significant in some of the model members on the Monday morning. As we head to Tuesday morning, that low pushes just near the Pilbara coastline. As we head to Wednesday, we see that it's just a broad area of lower pressure and not much happening in terms of the ensemble members suggesting that this is going to be any more significant than it is. And as we head to Thursday, just the hint there on Thursday that there might be something a little bit more significant starting to form around the Pilbara coastline itself. And that's what we mean. Sort of late next week, the conditions do start to improve just in this area. And so it is something we will need to watch. But look, at this stage, we can't see it happening in the next 3 or 4 days. But after that, we do see a little bit of a signal here as we head to Thursday and Friday where something more significant could be near the Pilbara coastline. The good news is that at the moment, if it is, as opposed to the GFS ensemble, the European ensemble keeps, if it is significant, keeps it much closer to the coastline, which means great news if you're after some rain, particularly the Western Pilbara, which missed out on most of the rain from the last amazing tropical low that went through there. So that is something to note. And then as we head towards Saturday, it looks like it's broadening out into a generalized low pressure region here. Possibly attached to a trough system. But anyway, this is a little bit better than what the guidance was showing us this time yesterday. So, if we just have a quick look at the European, Sunday morning we see the low located here to the north of Derby, and pushing into Sunday night we see it really start to wash out into more of a trophy type convergence line or convergence zone right here off the coast of the West Kimberley. And as we head towards Monday morning, we see that there's going to be some fairly intense winds associated with that convergence line, and obviously with those intense winds you would tend to suggest you're going to see some very, very heavy rainfall in the vicinity of where that's happening, and that's what we see here in the chart as we head from Sunday night, as we head from Sunday afternoon through to Monday morning. We see this rain really heading offshore with the system, but we're also going to see that trough system possibly causing some gales, and that could be another reason why the demobilisation may have occurred, just because of those gales that could be associated with that system, or the convergence with that system. Anyway, as we head towards Monday night, we see that once again it's not really a recognised low pressure system, and then as we head to Tuesday morning, we start to see a bit of rotation there, and that convergence zone, or that vorticity, starts to form a low pressure area to the northwest or northwest of Barrow Island. And then as we head to Tuesday night, it really doesn't significantly develop. And if we have a look at why that might be the case, and we look at our two culprits, wind shear, we see that the system is located in moderate to high vertical wind shear to its north. If it stays a bit closer to the coast, there's a chance for it to further develop in terms of wind shear. But look, if it gets offshore, there's a lot of wind shear up here, and it doesn't look like it's abating anytime soon. So the only chance the system would have of further developing into a TC would be if it remained fairly close to the coast. If we also have a look at the relative humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, cyclones require a lot of mid-level moisture, and they require this blue colouring. 70% plus is ideal. 60 to 70, it'll just survive. Anything in the purples, it's going to die. And we can see that the low pressure system is located right in the purple zone, which is some dry air coming up off the Pilbara, and some dry air streaming straight into the circulation here. Some moist air out to the east and some moist air out to the west, but unless that moist air is over the top of the circulation centre, it's not going to develop. And so that's why things are unfavourable for development at this point in time for that tropical low. Obviously, if we look at sea surface temperatures in the region, we can see they don't pose a problem anywhere sort of east of Exmouth, really. There's 26 plus degrees, particularly right near the coast. Now, you know, if we've got low wind shear conditions here and sea surface temperatures are 30 degrees plus, you know, you can't ever just say it's never going to possibly develop. So we've always got to leave that option open. But at this point in time, it needs to remain very close to the coast to avoid the wind shear. If it heads offshore, the chances are wind shear will continue to kill the thunderstorm activity associated with the low-level circulation centre. All right, folks, that's all we have time for today. But just before I leave you, just letting you know that we have been placed, or we've placed our team on alert. That means that the team has been notified that we're watching a tropical low, and it has a moderate to high chance of becoming a cyclone and pushing towards the coast. That's for the Queensland system we are looking at, and we will look at possibly upgrading that to the planning stage sometime tomorrow if guidance continues to show a landfalling system. However, once again, that Coral Sea system is not a done deal, and we will stay on alert until we've got more conclusive evidence that it will make landfall late next week, or mid to late next week, as a cyclone. Thanks very much for watching tonight. I know it's been long, but we've got a lot to cover. We'll talk again tomorrow night. Good night.